Welcome, friends. Thanks for joining me for another tale from Swamp Horror Stories. Title for this one is The Four Dogmen of Burns Point. Down in Burns Point, the oldest fishermen all knew the same rule. If the fog rolled in from the Gulf after midnight, get off the water. Not because of storms, not because of tides, because something comes in with the fog. No one could agree on what waited inside that white wall. Some called it a drowned king. Others whispered that it was the drowned spirit of a pirate captain cursed beneath the gulf, condemned to wander the black waters where his ship had vanished centuries ago. A few swore it was something far older than any ghost, a thing that had been sleeping beneath the layers of mud, silt, and ancient wreckage on the Gulf floor since before the first canoes crossed those waters. Whatever it was, it never came alone. Fog always arrived first, then the silence, then the lights. Strange yellow lights drifted through the marsh at night, hovering just above the dark water like lanterns carried by invisible hands. They moved slowly between the reeds, casting sickly reflections across the surface before vanishing without a ripple or sound. And if a fisherman followed those lights, if he let curiosity pull him deeper into the fog, that fisherman was never seen again. I'd heard those stories all my entire life. Like everyone else, I laughed them off. Ghost stories told by old men who had spent too many nights alone on the water, until the night I learned why the old Cajun fisherman never laughed at the fog. I had stayed out too long chasing speckled trout near the mouth of the Atchafalaya. The Gulf had been smooth as glass when I started back. The only sounds, the low hum of my motor and the slap of water against the aluminum hull. Then in less than 5 minutes, a wall of white fog rolled across the water and swallowed everything. The shoreline disappeared. The stars disappeared. Even the bow of my own skiff vanished a few feet ahead of me. My GPS screen flickered between coordinates and static. Compass needle spun wildly, trembling like it was trying to escape its own housing. Even the engine sounded wrong, muffled and distant, as if the fog wrapped around every sound and smothered it before it could travel. Then I saw the first light. A dull yellow glow floated ahead in the mist. No boat, no person holding a lantern, no footsteps in the water, just a light. It drifted deeper into the fog, swaying gently as though something unseen carried it through the darkness, almost inviting me to follow. Without thinking, I eased the throttle forward. Something deep inside me, a feeling older than reason, told me I needed to know where it was going. Then another sound cut through the silence. Not a human. A low, heavy, predatory growl. It came from somewhere beside my boat, somewhere beyond the reach of my eyes. The yellow light stopped moving, then it went out. Silence that followed was complete. No insects, no waves, no engine, no tap-tap on the side of my boat. Smell reached me before I saw anything. Salt, rotting seaweed, dead fish, and something much worse. A smell like a grave opened up beneath the ocean floor, a mixture of decay, stagnant water, and something ancient that should have remained buried. The water beside my boat began to tremble, not from waves, not from the wind, from something moving beneath the surface, something massive. The black water rose, then a pale hand broke through. The fingers curled over the surface, ending in black claws. Another hand followed. Then a head emerged. Its skin was gray and swollen, Dark water poured from empty eye sockets. Seaweed hung from its shoulders. Barnacles covered its chest. It opened its mouth. Broken teeth clicked together as it stared at me. The thing did not climb into the boat. It stood on the water, watching. Then shapes appeared behind it. One, then another, then dozens. Drowned figures rose from the fog, silent and still. An army of dead stood at the edge of the marsh. Before I could move, a howl ripped through the darkness. It wasn't a wolf's cry. It was deeper, older. A sound that shook the water beneath my boat. A second howl answered, then a third, then a fourth. The drowned figures froze. 4 massive shapes stepped from the reeds. Dogmen. Each towered over 8 feet tall. Their fur was dark and thick. Their bodies were built like something made for war. They moved with purpose, no hesitation, no fear. Each carried scars from battles I could only imagine. The first had black fur streaked with silver around its muzzle. The second was reddish brown and broad as a bear. The third had a torn ear, a milky eye, and a scar running down its throat. The fourth was the largest. A worn leather strap crossed its shoulder, tangled with old fishing cords, rusted hooks, and pieces of rope. They never looked at me. Their eyes stared on the drowned creatures. The largest dogman stepped forward. The dead answered with wet hisses. Then the marsh exploded. First creature attacked. The largest dogman hit it before it reached the shore. The impact sent the drowned thing crashing into the water. The other 3 rushed into the fog. Growls thundered through the reeds. Water erupted. Bodies slammed together in the darkness. One dogman grabbed a drowned creature and ripped it from the water. It threw the thing into the marsh. Another stood beside my skiff, guarding me from whatever came through the fog. It never looked away. More drowned figures rose. They crawled from the water. They pushed through the surface. They kept coming. The fog hid them until they struck. The fight became a blur. Claws, splashes, crashing bodies. The screams of things that should have stayed buried. Then the largest dogman stopped. It lifted its head and howled. The other 3 answered. The sound rose across the gulf. The drowned creatures froze. One by one they sank. No struggle, no escape. They simply disappeared beneath the black water. Within moments, they were gone. Finally, the moon broke through the clouds. Silver light spilled across the water, revealing only empty waves and drifting pieces of seaweed. The gulf became still. The 4 dogmen stood silently in the mist. The largest slowly turned toward me. For the first time, our eyes met. There was no hatred, no hunger, only exhaustion, and something that looked almost like sorrow. Its fur was damp with fog and seawater, its chest rising and falling with slow, heavy breaths after the battle. It gave a single slow nod, a silent command, telling me to go home. Then all 4 disappeared into the marsh, their heavy footsteps fading among the reeds until there was nothing left but the sound of the tide. The next morning I told an old shrimper what had happened. He listened without interrupting, his weathered hands resting on the edge of the dock as he stared toward the gulf. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He didn't question me. He only looked out at the water for a long time, like he was remembering something he wished he could forget. My granddaddy told me about them. Call them the 4 keepers. They've been guarding Burns Point longer than anyone can remember. I asked him why. Why would they do this? The old shrimper's face tightened. Maybe they were once men. Maybe they're cursed. Maybe they're doomed to watch over the Gulf the rest of their lives. Maybe there was something else entirely. He swallowed hard. But whatever they are, they're the only thing keeping what's below from reaching us. His eyes moved toward the Gulf, not the horizon, the water itself. People think the fog hides things from you. It doesn't. It brings them closer. He was quiet for a moment. Then he lowered his voice. If you're ever caught out there again, don't call for help. For God's sake, don't follow those lights. Don't answer anything that calls your name. I felt a chill run through me. Why? The old man looked back at me. Because the things in that fog have learned how we sound. He turned toward the Gulf one last time. Pray you hear 4 howls before you hear the first splash. Because if the fog reaches you first and the 4 dogmen don't, the Gulf won't drown you. It won't kill you. It will keep you. Years later, when the fog rolls back over Burns Point, fishermen still hear voices drifting across the water. Not cries for help, not screams, whispers, familiar whispers. The voices of men who vanished decades ago. Fathers, brothers, friends, calling from beneath the waves, waiting for someone to reach down, waiting for someone to answer. But the old fishermen know better. Gulf does not return what it takes. It only lets it speak. Just long enough to bring someone else closer. So when a voice rises from the black water, when it sounds like someone you love, when it says your name, don't answer it. Don't look down. Don't follow the lights. Because the dead are trapped beneath the Gulf. They are the Gulf now. And somewhere below the waves, where the sun has never touched and the water has no bottom, they're waiting, listening, learning. Because the Gulf remembers every voice it steals. And when the fog comes for you, it will not need to call your name. It will already know how you sound. Here's a treat for you listeners. If you're still awake, please remember to hit that subscribe button. Share it if you're enjoying this story. Hit that like and hit that thumbs up. And ring that bell so you'll be notified of my next upload. And now, I'll start the next story. I call this one The Wolf and the Dogman. I had gone deeper into the swamp than I intended that evening. The sun was already sinking behind the crooked crowns of the cypress trees, bleeding orange and crimson light across the sky. The water beneath them reflected the colors of old rust and dried blood, broken by the slow drift of leaves and the occasional ripple from something unseen moving below the surface. I had been following an old trapping trail that wound along a narrow strip of high ground between 2 stretches of flooded timber. It was a trail I had walked many times before, but that evening something felt different. The swamp felt like it was holding its breath. The air was thick and heavy, pressing against my skin with the damp warmth of a place that never truly dried. The smell of mud, decaying leaves, and stagnant water hung everywhere, mixing with the sharp scent of moss-covered bark and something faintly sour that I couldn't identify. The swamp was too quiet. There were no frogs calling from the black water, no insects whining through the brush, no distant splash from fish breaking the surface. Even the white egrets that usually cried from the treetops had gone silent, their empty branches standing like twisting, fingers across the fading sky. All I could hear was the soft sucking sound of my boots pulling free from the mud. Each step sank deeper than it should have, the mud gripping my boots before releasing them with a wet, reluctant pull. I should have turned around. Every instinct I had told me to leave. Instead, I kept walking. That was when I found the tracks. The first set belonged to a wolf. At least, that's what I thought. The prints were enormous, almost as large as my open hand. 4 deep toe marks sank into the mud around a heavy central pad. The edges sharp and fresh, as if the creature had passed only moments before. Water slowly seeped into the impressions, filling them with dark brown pools. They followed the trail for several yards before disappearing beneath the murky water. Wolves were rare in that part of the swamp, and none should have been that large. Then I saw the second trail. Those tracks looked similar, but they were longer and narrower. They were not paw prints, not exactly. They appeared to have been made by something walking upright. One print, then another. Each stride covered nearly 5 feet. The impressions sank deep into the earth, showing the weight of whatever had made them. The toes were too long, the shape too wrong, stretching forward like something that had learned to imitate the way a person walked without ever truly becoming one. The creature that made them had crossed the wolf's path and continued toward a thick stand of cypress trees ahead of me. I stood there staring at the tracks until a long howl drifted through the swamp. It began as a low, mournful vibration that seemed to roll across the water rather than through the air. The sound rose slowly, twisting between the trees, until it became a powerful cry that rattled the branches above me and seemed to pass through my ribs and into my bones. Before the sound had faded, something answered. It was not another howl. It was a deep, guttural roar, a sound that seemed too heavy to come from any living throat. The kind of sound no normal animal could make. It came from directly ahead of me. Branches snapped in the distance. Something large moved through the brush, crushing reeds and breaking limbs with careless strength. Then came the sound of heavy splashing. Something was moving through the shallows, something big. I turned to leave. Then I heard running footsteps behind me. Not the quick, light movement of an animal. Heavy impacts. Each step shook the ground beneath my feet. Whatever was coming moved too quickly for me to escape. I stepped off the trail and crouched behind the wide trunk of an ancient cypress tree. Its roots rose around me like a wooden wall, twisted and swollen from decades of standing in black water. The bark was rough against my back, damp with moss and cold moisture. I pressed myself against it and tried to control my breathing. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, nothing moved. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. Felt like something was standing nearby, listening. Then a huge gray wolf entered the clearing. It was the largest wolf I had ever seen. Its back stood nearly high as my chest would have. Thick, silver-gray fur covered its powerful shoulders, each strand catching the last traces of fading light. Black markings ran along its spine like streaks of spilled ink. One side of its muzzle was scarred, leaving a strip of pale flesh beneath its right eye. Its fur was wet along its legs, dripping swamp water onto the ground with each step. The wolf moved slowly through the shallow water. Its head remained low, its yellow eyes searching the surrounding trees. It wasn't hunting, it was waiting. The wolf reached the center of the clearing and stopped. Its ears twitched toward the darkness. Its lips pulled away from long ivory teeth, revealing a mouth built for tearing. A growl rolled from its chest. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was deep enough that I felt it vibrating through the trees behind me. Something moved on the opposite side of the clearing. At first, all I saw was a dark shape standing between two cypress trees. It did not move like an animal. It stood too still, too upright. Then it stepped forward. It was a dogman. He was nearly 8 feet tall. His body was shaped like a man's, but covered in coarse black fur that looked almost wet beneath the dim light. Its shoulders were broad and powerful, its arms hanging nearly to its knees. Long claws curved from each hand, scraping lightly against the bark of the trees as it moved. Its head resembled that of a massive wolf, but its eyes were different. There was intelligence in them, and hatred. The dogman stared at the gray wolf. The wolf stared back. Neither creature seemed surprised to see the other. They had come here for this reason. The dogman released a series of low grunts and clicks, almost as though it were speaking in a language meant only for the wolf. The sounds were unnatural, too deliberate, like words forced through a throat never meant to form them. The gray wolf responded with a rumbling growl. The dogman's ears flattened. Then it charged. It crossed the clearing in 3 enormous strides. The ground shook beneath its weight. The wolf sprang aside just before the dogman's claws struck the ground. Mud and black water exploded upward, spraying the surrounding trees. The wolf twisted in midair and clamped his jaws around the dogman's forearm. The dogman roared. Sound shook birds from distant branches. It lifted the wolf completely off the ground and slammed it against the side of a cypress tree. The impact cracked through the swamp like a gunshot. Chunks of bark rained down. The wolf fell into the water but immediately rolled back onto its feet. Blood darkened the fur along its sides, spreading through the silver like spilled ink. The dogman rushed forward again. This time the wolf met it head on. They collided in the center of the clearing. The sound was like 2 massive trees crashing together. The dogman grabbed the wolf around its neck. The wolf twisted violently and sank its teeth into the creature's shoulder. The dogman threw back its head and screamed. The cry sounded almost human. That was the worst part. It stumbled backward, dragging the wolf with it. Then it struck the animal again with one clawed hand, each impact making wet, heavy sounds against fur and flesh. The wolf refused to release its bite. Black blood ran through its teeth. Finally, the dogman drove one knee into the wolf's ribs. The sickening crack echoed through the clearing. The wolf fell away. I pressed myself harder against a tree. Every instinct told me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The nearest open trail was on the other side of the 2 creatures. The dogman slowly circled the injured wolf. The wolf struggled to stand. One of its rear legs buckled beneath it. The dogman appeared to smile. It knew the fight was almost over. Then the wolf looked toward my hiding place. Its yellow eyes met mine through a gap in the cypress roots. For one terrible moment, I thought it would reveal me. Instead, the wolf looked beyond me. Its ears rose. Something else was moving through the swamp. The dogman heard it too. It turned toward the trees. A strange, chattering sound came from the darkness. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't an insect. Something wet and clicking. The water behind me began to ripple. The dogman forgot about the wolf. It lifted its snout and breathed deeply. The clicking grew louder. Something pale moved between the trees. At first I thought it was a reflection from the moonlight caught between the trunks. Then it moved. Not like a living thing, like something being pulled through the world by invisible strings. Its long, thin limbs bent at impossible angles, folding and unfolding with slow, jerking motions. Its arms dragged through the water behind it, leaving ripples that moved in wrong direction, spreading outward before the creature had even taken another step. Its skin was pale and stretched tight, almost translucent, with dark veins shifting beneath the surface like worms trapped under ice. The sound it made was worse than its appearance. A wet clicking came from somewhere deep inside its body, followed by a grinding noise like stones being crushed together. Every movement produced small snaps and pops, as if its bones were rearranging themselves with each step. The creature stopped at the edge of the clearing. The air changed. The swamp smelled suddenly rotten, like stagnant water mixed with something dead and buried for years. The wolf lowered its head. The dogman's growl deepened. For the first time, I saw fear in the creature's eyes. The pale thing lifted its head slowly, too slowly. Its blank face turned toward the dogman, then toward the wolf, and finally toward me. I felt its attention settle on me, even though it had no eyes, no mouth, nothing that should have been able to see. The smooth surface of its face began to twitch. A thin crack appeared down the center. The crack widened. The creature's head split open from top to bottom with a sound like wet fabric being torn apart. Inside was not a throat or a skull. It was a hollow darkness filled with hundreds of tiny moving teeth, all shifting and scraping against one another. The clicking stopped. The creature inhaled. Sound was like the swamp itself being drained through a narrow pipe. The wolf lunged first. Despite its injuries, it crossed the water and struck the pale creature in the chest. The thing folded around the wolf like a sheet. Its body stretched and wrapped over the animal, clinging with cold, sick grip. The wolf thrashed beneath the pale skin, its claws tearing at the creature's side as the thing released a shriek that sounded like metal twisting under water. The dogman charged a second later. It grabbed the creature by one of the long arms and pulled. The arm stretched impossibly far before tearing loose with a wet, ripping sound. Thick, black fluid sprayed across the water. The pale creature screamed. The noise felt as though it came from inside my own skull. I covered my ears, but it did no good. The wolf tore at the thing's legs while the dogman struck its upper body with both hands. For a few seconds, the two enemies fought together. The pale creature twisted between them, lashing out with its remaining arm. Its claws opened the dogman's chest and sent the wolf rolling through the water. The dogman staggered. The creature turned toward it and opened its vertical mouth. The wolf leaped onto its back. Its jaws locked around the base of the pale thing's neck. The dogman grabbed the creature's head with both hands. It pulled. The pale body stretched. The wolf held on. With one final roar, the dogman twisted the creature's head completely around. The screaming stopped. The pale thing collapsed into the water. Its body did not float. White skin turned into a thick black mist that spread across the surface before sinking out of sight. The wolf released its grip and backed away. The dogman stood over what remained. Both creatures were wounded. Both were exhausted. For several moments they simply watched each other. The fight between them was not over. It had only been interrupted. The wolf lowered its head and growled. The dogman answered. but neither moved. The battle they had been waiting years to finish would have to wait longer. The wolf's breathing was heavy and uneven. Each breath sent a tremor through its injured body. Blood still stained its silver fur, and the leg that had buckled beneath it refused to fully support its weight. The dogman was in no better condition. The wounds across his chest and shoulder were deep, and black blood dripped from its claws into the muddy water. Its movements, once powerful and quick, had become slow and cautious. They both understood the same thing. A fight between them now would not prove who was stronger. It would only leave them both too weak to survive what was coming. The dogman took a step back. The wolf watched carefully but did not attack. For the first time, there was something other than hatred between them. Recognition. They had both been pushed to their limits. They had both nearly died. And they both needed time to heal. The dogman turned toward the deeper part of the swamp, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows seemed to swallow the fading light. It paused and looked back at the wolf. The wolf lowered itself into the mud, conserving what was left of its energy. Neither creature trusted the other, but neither had the energy to continue. The dogman disappeared into the darkness. The wolf remained in the clearing for several minutes, licking the wounds along its side and carefully testing its injured leg. Then it limped toward the opposite side of the swamp, moving slowly into the trees. I watched until both creatures were gone. Only then did I realize how close I had come to witnessing something far worse than a fight. I had seen two monsters choose survival over revenge, but I also knew something else. The next time they met, there would be no pale creature to interrupt them. And when their wounds had healed, the fight would begin again. The wolf looked at me once more. There was no friendliness in its eyes, but there was no hunger either. It had not saved me because it cared about me. It had simply decided that I did not belong to the dogman. The wolf limped toward the opposite side of the clearing. Before entering the trees, it stopped and looked back at the patch of water where the pale creature had disappeared. Small bubbles were rising from below. The wolf released a quiet whine. Then it vanished into the swamp. I waited until complete darkness before leaving my hiding place. I never found the trapping trail. I simply walked until I saw the distant light of my cabin through the trees. The next morning I returned with a rifle and 2 men from Burns Point. We found the clearing. We found the broken trees. We found blood on the cypress bark, but there were no bodies. Only 3 sets of tracks, wolf prints, dogman prints, and a long trail of narrow, human-like footprints leading out of the water. The tracks continued to the tree where I had hidden. They circled it twice. Then they followed my trail all the way back toward my cabin. The pale creature had not died in that clearing, and whatever the wolf and the dogman had been fighting against, it had followed me home. Weeks later, after that night, I tried to convince myself I had seen something my mind couldn't explain. I told myself the swamp had played tricks on me. The darkness, the exhaustion, the fear. These were the things I blamed. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had followed me out of that swamp. I started noticing small things around my property. Dead animals left near tree lines. Strange marks carved into the mud behind my cabin. The sound of clicking coming from the woods after midnight. Always the same sound. Wet, slow, patient. I never saw anything, not until 3 weeks later. That night, I was sitting on my porch, with a camera beside me, recording an update for the people who had been following my stories. I told my subscribers about strange tracks, the sounds, and the things I'd experienced in the swamp. Some people believed me, some didn't. I understood why. If I had not seen it myself, I probably wouldn't have believed it either. Then, while I was talking, the camera picked up on something behind me, a movement near the tree line. I stopped speaking. I looked over my shoulder. At first, I didn't see anything. Then the darkness between the trees shifted. The white creature stepped forward. It was different this time. It was closer. And it was watching me. Pale skin looked tighter than before, stretched over a body that seemed thinner and more damaged. One of its arms hung lower than the other, as if the injury from the swamp had never healed. How it got put back together, I didn't know, only maybe through some miraculous recovery that these things had in their bodies. I don't know. But the worst part was its face. The crack down the center was still there, only now it was wider, like it had learned how to open it. The camera continued recording. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the creature clicking. Then it did something I will never forget. It raised one long finger and pointed directly at the camera. Not at me, at the camera. At everyone watching, all of you. It knew. It knew I had been telling people about it. The creature tilted its head. Hundreds of tiny teeth inside its open mouth began moving. And then, for the first time, it made a sound that almost resembled a word. A broken whisper, a name. My name. I ran inside. I locked every door, the camera still outside. I turned on every light. I stayed awake until sunrise. When I finally stepped outside, the creature was gone, but the camera was still sitting on the porch. The recording was still running. And when I watched the footage back, I noticed something I had missed. The creature had not come alone. Standing behind it, barely visible between the trees, was the gray wolf. And further back in the darkness, the dogman was watching too. They were not fighting. They were waiting. So tell me in the comments what you think or why you think the dogman and the wolf were there. Had they somehow joined this white creature and were plotting against me? Maybe you'll find out in my next story. Please remember to subscribe and like and share and join me from the next story when maybe, just maybe, the reason behind this will be revealed. Thanks again for watching and listening, and God bless.